What's up, everybody? Clint Esposito here with number 119 of the Two Wheels to Freedom show. This time we have Dale Spangler. He's actually been in the motorsports industry for 30 years and started a cool media business creating content for companies. But first, this podcast is brought to you by the Two Wheels to Freedom Fest, which is April 19th and 20th. In Winsboro, South Carolina. Go to twowheelstofreedom.com for all the information. What's up, Dale? How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fantastic. It's Friday. Got most of my work done for the week. Finished up yesterday. I had three jobs. I was writing that I had like a post AIM Expo assignment that I was working on. I'm contracted with a guy that works for eBay Motors and does all the blog work on there. And so anything from automotive to two wheels, and
Cool.
so I'm focused on two and four wheels like quads and all that kind of stuff. So I had a little assignment from AIM Expo. So it was pretty fun. I walked around and I found three like outstanding things that I thought kind of really stood out from the show. So yeah, got all my stuff done and new Idols album came out today, one of my favorite bands. So I'm pretty pumped about that. I just got to listen in before we hopped on here. So
So you're
yeah, it's
having a
going
good
well.
week.
Oh yeah.
Was AIM just
Yeah,
last weekend?
yeah, so it was last week. So it was Tuesday through Thursday. And I just went Tuesday and Wednesday, and yeah, I think I got like almost 30,000 steps in over 2 days. So it was a lot of walking, but it was great. Like I feel like I reconnected with a lot of people hadn't seen for a while. Like for example, I didn't even know like Scott Sepkovic, probably a guy pretty well from Monster and all that. Him, Jeremy McGrath, Bob Harrow, and Eddie Cole all started a new bicycle brand called 101 Bikes. And so I'm walking around and I see Scott Sepkovic's like, "Hey, Dale," and I'm like, "God!" Like I hadn't seen him for probably 20 years. We grew up racing together in Western Pennsylvania, and then I think he moved to California and kind of he's got all his stuff going down. I think with Arma, he's got all kinds of stuff going on. So, anyways, yes, people like so many situations like that where I just felt like saw all these people I hadn't seen for a while, made a bunch of new connections. I think I got a couple new brands that I might be able to do some work for. So yeah, it was a good show. It was worth it.
Awesome. So, well, let's start with how you got into motorsports. You obviously said that you grew up racing in Western
Yep.
Pennsylvania.
Yep. Yeah. So I grew up in Northeast Ohio, actually, like east of Cleveland, up on Lake Erie. And so I would go race, northern, southern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, places like High Point, and Mount Morris, PA. So, I mean, that was actually my closest national track by the time I got to the pro level. I think it was 3 hours to High Point. So that was like my kind of my home race, if you will.
Yeah.
And then we had Troy, which is maybe 4.5 hours southern Ohio. But yeah, so I was a racer just like a lot of us, till I want to say 19, I think. And my dad and I had a little pact where if I don't have a factory ride by then I'd probably look to do something else. And so then I tried to be normal for a couple of years and went and got like a drafting degree, like a little 2 year degree, and worked for a construction company as a commercial contractor and an estimator, and did all kinds of things that I thought would be fun to do and normal.
Yeah.
But then I realized, nah, it's not really me. So then I went back and tried to race again. And at the same time, took my first job in the industry with Cometic Gasket in Cleveland, like kind of east of Cleveland. That was 1994. And
Awesome.
yeah, after that, I was kind of just been different companies throughout my career. This is actually my 31st year in the industry. So I don't know
Awesome.
where it's all gone.
Yeah, you realize quickly that when this something like motorcycles is in your blood, a quote unquote normal job just doesn't like fuel the fire a lot of times.
Absolutely. I was getting, there's a couple of my jobs, when I was younger there, I think I was just kind of the racer punk, if you will, where I just didn't, I didn't respect when I was going to these jobs and just kind of messed around a lot. And so I think I went through a few of those, jobs where I think I probably got fired at one. I remember screwing around one day and taking like rolls of duct tape and putting it on broom handles and like throwing them across the warehouse trying to hit people with it, and I blew out a light in the ceiling, and that was the end of that one. So I got fired on that one. But I think that was the one and only other time I got fired. But yeah, I don't know. I just had, I hadn't grown up yet and still thought I was a racer in my mind and, probably deserved more than I did. But yeah, getting those industry jobs, I think it sort of grounded me. And just over time, I just gradually kind of embraced it. And I've tried to get out of the industry a few times through the years, but I just, this is where my value's at. And so now I've kind of just turned that around and embraced it.
Well, that's when I stopped riding for a living, like officially I was same thing gonna, just go and do something else. And it's like just like yourself, the amount of time we put into the sport, it's like what are you gonna do, or the industry, you're just like I'm just gonna walk away and start over from zero. So there's a lot of that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, really, that's the more I think about it, I'm like, that's where my value's at in power sports with all my experience. Sometimes it kind of works against me. Like I've tried to apply for jobs and I think they look at me and go, well, that much experience, there's no way he's going to want too much money or whatever. But it's not really the case, and so, a lot of times.
Right.
But yeah, I've just kind of, I don't know, I guess embraced the fact that that's where my value's at. And so, it's hard for me to go command like a pretty good, hourly wage in industries other than, power sports just because they don't see the same value in it. So, yeah, like I said, I've kind of embraced it and it's been fun. Like I'll use the example of eBay Motors again because like I was looking at their site yesterday and they have a really good group of writers. This contractor I work for, he's contract and then he goes and hires all the writers. And so it was cool to see like all these fellow writers that I'm going, wow, these people really have accomplished a lot. And so it made me kind of feel pretty good about being part of that group, contributing to their blog. And so yeah, it's just kind of neat to see others kind of similar path, in different industries. A lot of them are from the auto industry, so just kind of seeing a similar path is sort of reassuring, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. I feel like I like anything I can do must not be that hard because I can do it, and I feel like maybe you have a touch of the same where it's like you're too close into it, so you don't like realize your value really because you're
Yep,
just like, oh, it's just me writing stuff. But you don't realize because you're so deep into this that other people couldn't just come into this space and write something where you or I would be like, oh, that makes sense, or that was a good article. You'd be like, this guy knows nothing about this at all.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can tell, like, especially, I mean, we know power sports has its own lingo, its own, lingua franca, if you will, but it's if you don't know it, it's obvious, and so that comes across, of course, in writing. That's where I'm feeling like I'm finding my value where they hire somebody like me to have that power sports voice that's authentic. And in some cases, I've even come across where like some of the editors kind of start changing things, and I'm like, no, no, that's actually this is the correct lingo. Like, don't change it, because
Right.
they're used to like speaking differently. And so, yeah, I've even had situations like that. But um, yeah, it's been fun. I feel like I've grown so much in the last probably 5 years with, writing full time. I was just thinking about it the other day, and I'm like, wow, I mean, I was looking at my portfolio, just adding a few things to it. I'm like, there's so many things I've written in the last 5 years that I forgot half of them. So it's, it's
Well,
kind of
that's I'm
funny.
on your site. I actually have your site pulled up, and I'm on the work page, and
Hmm.
just all the companies that you've worked with, you know, uh,
Yeah.
are a lot of big eBay Motors, obviously, but Pod, the knee braces, and I guess other protective gear as well. Weisco, Dealer News, Seat Time, Wassner. I mean, a lot of good big companies. So,
Yep, DynoJet's another one. Onyx is probably my longest client, Onyx Maps. That's that GPS app for off-roaders. And
oh, cool.
yeah, it was probably a couple months after I started, like my freelance Buzz Media business, which I've actually had Buzz Media, the LLC I created back in, see, what was it now, 2016, because I have dirtbuzz.com. I had this website that I created that, I'm going to try and focus on the off-road, like enduro GNCC space. I felt like it was underserved, with content, and so I focused on that for a couple of years, and I just realized that I love creating content, but I don't really like having to go out and solicit sponsors
Yeah.
and ask for money. So that's just kind of like where I don't know. It was fun for a while, but I also think it helped me hone my craft of writing. So that now where I'm at now, all those years of me kind of practicing, if you will, has helped me to where I'm at right now. So I think it's kind of gave me a leg up. So yeah, I've had the LLC since 2016, and then Buzz Media content creation I started in 2020, and that was after I got laid off from my last job at Tucker Power Sports during COVID. And yeah, I just decided, well, I kind of tried to find some jobs and wasn't having any luck for 3, 4 months. And so I just said, well, let's try it on my own. And luckily enough, I made enough contacts through the years, did a lot of media relations. So I feel like I knew enough people to be able to, get a leg up with, a few brands right away, like EVS being one of them, EVS Sports, and then Onyx. So yeah, I'm really thankful to those two companies for just kind of stepping up and giving me a chance because I feel like once you start going and like you see my portfolio, like it starts building, and then I feel like it helps open more doors. And so
Yeah.
it's been going well. It's slow, steady. I can't say steady because some months are rough, other months are, full of jobs, but um, yeah, it's good though. I like it.
What would you say is your favorite content to create? You mentioned writing a lot. Is that what you would say that your chosen medium is, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the podcasting thing when I was doing that, that's really something that's kind of out of my wheelhouse in a way, just because I'm more of a pretty introverted, to be honest. Like I'm not naturally a person that like will go up and stand in front of people and talk and that kind of thing. But I think if it's something I'm knowledgeable about, that I feel comfortable enough to talk about it, and that's where I think I was okay with the podcast. But and I think it pushed me a little bit. And so, but I also think it helps me with my writing, doing those podcasts, because conducting these type of interviews like you're doing with me right now, it's just another thing you're practicing to where when I would do a written interview, like I recently did a piece for Upshift Online with Mason Klein, the Dakar racer. And so, I mean, I'm able, I feel like I have this skill now where I'm able to get somebody on the phone and get them to relax and really kind of loosen up and tell me deeper parts of the story. And then I took that podcast and I just transcribed the whole thing. It took me forever, but it was cool. It was worth it. I enjoyed the process the entire time. So I just feel like those types of deep interviews where you can really dig some kind of nuggets out, get people to open up a little more than usual. Those are some of my favorite interviews. So yeah, written words definitely where my wheelhouse is. I'd say probably some of my favorite things I've ever written are my two musical motorcycle pieces that I've done. One with Wesley Schultz of the Lumineers, lead singer for that band. That was, I think,
Cool.
4 years ago now. That was when the magazine Vahna was Meta. Now it's Vahna. And then my recent one I did with Connor, another musician he's actually from Maryland. So kind of over in your area. He
Yeah.
just moved back. He was living in LA and, like an old racer like us, and decided he wanted to chase his dream of, becoming a musician. And
Cool.
so yeah, I got to do an interview with him. I just love that kind of stuff where you combine two of my biggest passions, music and motorcycles, in one written piece.
Yeah, that's always good when you get to combine like the same thing. I'm always trying to get comedy and motorcycles merged together because I have
Yeah, exactly.
a specific interest in both of them. So it's kind of like, how do I make this happen?
I know if you do the two together, it's even better, right?
Yeah,
It's like
exactly. I want to talk to Rick Thorne because he's doing comedy now. He's a BMXer, but he's now doing comedy, which I just like the crossover there. And there's a lot of, especially BMX is very close to motorcycles, obviously. So
yeah,
I feel like there would be a lot of uh, connection there as far as like lifestyles and all that.
I feel like BMX and skate guys are just hilarious to me because they're always just doing something like shenanigans. They're up to something, like messing with people or
Yeah,
just there's always a bit of comedy it seemed like involved.
yeah, they're wilder because they don't have to. It's like once you don't have to buy a full motorcycle, it's like
Oh yeah,
you can screw around more.
definitely. Yeah, you're carrying just a skateboard around that if you lose it, big deal. You can run away instead of a $10,000 dirt bike
Yeah,
that gets taken away from you.
I was always even jealous of like BMXers a little bit, but not as much as like skateboarders. But I'm like, think about them traveling. They just have like a bag with some boards in it, and they're like good to go. And I'm like, need to haul this big bike and a ramp and whatever else.
I always wonder what it was like to be a BMXer meeting girls because I'm thinking like, how do you talk to a girl about like, yeah, I ride BMX bikes, like for some reason, I just think that sometimes some people might think it's kind of like that's funny. I don't know.
Well, I
Maybe I'm
learned
wrong.
from FMX. They need to see you do it.
I bet. Yeah,
Otherwise,
that's
the story doesn't work. you know, like, because most don't
Yeah.
have enough reference with it where you're like, I jump dirt bikes and hang off of the back of them. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, then they see it and then they're like, "What?" Yeah, then they're
That's I'm
freaking
like,
out.
they got to see it first and then you got to talk to them. Otherwise, you're, you know, not doing anything.
I remember like back in the freestyle days, I'll kind of date myself. Like when I think I told you I worked at Smith Optics when I was going to some of those. Uh, the line that I always remember guys using was they were, hey, we're in town, we're underwater welders, like, and that was their kind of line to meet girls. So
Dude, we used to
I'm sure you
say
probably,
all kinds of stupid stuff. Just tell them we were in a
yeah,
band called the Mayonnaise Cannons. And
nice.
just stupid shit. Because you know that it's like, doesn't matter. You'll be gone in a couple of days. So
That's
you
funny.
worked for Smith.
Yep.
You were the rider rep?
So I was let's see, I'll kind of go back a little bit further. So I had that my first job was Cometic, and then I got a job in Italy to working with Alpine Stars, where I was
Awesome.
the first American. This was 1998 or 97, 98. I've lived actually in Oslo, Italy, where their factory is which is near Venice, like about
Cool.
45 minutes north. So I worked for them for I think almost 2 years. Drove a van around Europe everywhere, just like going to races, going to media offices. Like went to the UK to meet Jeremy McGrath because the owner of Alpine Star said, "Hey, he's by himself there, so he needs a American friend to be there." So I
Cool.
drove, loaded the van up, drove 14 hours, whatever, across the English Channel to the UK. So yeah, I had that job, just burned me out big time. I came back to the US and was sitting around for about 4 months and realized I need to make some money, get a job. So then I was actually a Smith athlete back in the day myself, and so the guy that was the manager of the power sports division is named Hook Taylor. You may have heard of him. Rich Taylor's dad
Oh,
that owns
okay.
X brand goggles. So that's
Got
his
it.
dad. So he was he sponsored me for years. He's like, hey, we've got this opening for the motorsport promotion manager. I want you to have it. I think you'd be perfect for it. I was just kind of like, again, kind of dumb. I'd come back from Italy. I'm 25 years old, just kind of a mess. My life's a mess a little bit. And I'm like, man, I just was living in Italy. I don't want to move to Idaho. I don't know anything about
Yeah.
Idaho. Like this, like the least populated, one of the least populated states in the country. So I said no.
You're like, I'd rather stay
And
in
then,
Ohio.
yeah, and then after about 3 more weeks or maybe a month or so, like I'm sitting around and go, man, I'm just spending money. I'm not making any money. So I call up Hook and he's like, you got to take the damn job, So I'm like, yes. So I take the job and that's I ended up in Sun Valley. That's where Smith was.
Cool.
Really difficult place to live, obviously, because it's an expensive place, So, um, but amazing job, amazing company, and yeah, I was going to all the national super, not all of them, but we had three of us. So like Rich, myself, another guy named Mark Ferris, who's now the CEO of Fast House, but
Okay.
he was at Smith forever. Like between the three of us, we were kind of the guys that went to the races and handed out all the goggles. Like it was pretty crude then. We
Yeah.
didn't have any vans or anything to like work out of. We had rental cars with bags of goggles. And so I just remember like so many nights like before a mud race, like at Mount Morris one year is a mud race, and I'm just freaking out because I've got 100 pair of goggles that I got to prepare for a mud race for all these riders and building, tear offs over the top of roll offs and all this shit. And
Yeah.
so it was just chaotic, just burned me out.
What
So,
year do you
but
think
yeah,
this
that's how I
is?
ended up at Smith. What's that?
What year is this?
So that's probably, let's see. So I took the job in 99 at Smith, and then like early into the 2000s is when I was really probably going to the most races. So
So
like 2000, 2001.
I rode East Coast Nationals or tried to qualify 2000 and 2001. That's why you started to say that, and I'm like, I think I was at that Mount Morris. I'm like, what year is this? Because I was at one. I mean, it rains there almost every year, but I was doing the timeline, and I'm like, I think I was there for that one. Eh,
Yeah,
I
I remember like distinctly like a really stressful year was the year that Greg Albertine won the outdoor title. And gosh, I want to was that like 2001 or 2 or
I
something
think
like that, one
so.
of those
Yeah.
years, but it was just so stressful because like preparing his goggles, like he was very particular.
Mm.
And, like at then I think I remember making one mistake where I was at a race and I was like, why is he wearing tear-offs? And like we're putting like Scott tear-offs on Smith goggles, and because we didn't have a good setup. And so I'm like, he needs to be wearing roll-offs. Like he's a Smith athlete. He needs to wear
Yeah.
roll-offs. So I remember giving him roll-offs, and he lost it. Like he was not happy with me. And in hindsight, I'm like, that was pretty dumb. I just gave him goggles he's not used to wearing, but
Yeah. That's
but he
funny.
won the title. And like I remember we special made like hand painted two sets of roll-offs. We had a silver pair, they looked like they were chrome, and then we had a gold pair, and he wore those, the silver pair on the penultimate, the next to last round, and then the round that he won the title, which I think was at Steel City, he wore the gold ones. And to this day, like it showed up in the ad, like the Suzuki
Yeah.
ad and all that stuff. So it was pretty cool. Like that was kind of a win for us because they'd never won anything like that. And but we had a good team. Like I was thinking back, we had like Josh Hill, we had the Alessi brothers, we had Zach Osborne. I mean, we had all these people that were just went on to become like huge heavy hitters. Like
Yeah.
Ryan Villapoto at one point was a Smith athlete. Like I always loved their product. To this day, I'm still kind of somewhat loyal to that brand just because I feel like I'm sort of a part of the history, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you are. And again, it's, just stuff to look back on where you were like, I did a lot of that, or at least I was there and helped. And,
Yep.
you know, I guess that's the appreciation you get. No, I mean the
Oh
people
yeah.
in there, but like for the general public, they will never know. But it's like you still have your, I have places I worked at where, now they're doing something, and it's just like you were there at the beginning and were able to help.
Yep. But yeah, it's funny. Like it's a lot more stressful, I think, than people probably realize on the surface. Like those type of jobs. Every time I see a mud, like those first mud supercrosses this year, I was just like, oh man,
Yeah.
I bet the goggle guys are just freaking out right now because they have the most stressful job.
Well, and because those guys are, like you said, they're picky, and if something happens, right, and they're like, listen, everybody's goggles are going to get screwed up in that type of race. It doesn't matter. And it's just like how early you happen to get splashed or whatever it is.
Yep.
But if they have a bad night, they need somebody to blame, or they're
Oh
at
yeah.
least in a bad mood already. So then guess what? He had to take his goggles off, so you're getting an earful. And
Yeah,
it's not your
we
fault.
had like Chad Reed and Tim Ferry were probably two of the hardest guys to deal with. Like, and at that time, like it was exactly like you said, man. If they had a bad moto, man, like goggles were just shit. Like
Yeah.
they weren't working. I splashed, whatever, like not working right. But then when they won, everything was fine.
Yeah.
But it's kind of that's where it was just it was a tough job after it just ground on you because you felt like you never really could have like a moment to enjoy it because you always were just worried about the next thing,
Yeah.
or so it was definitely one of the, it's funny, like Mathis and I had talked about it, like when I talked to him a few times on his show. And yeah, because he did goggles for a little while too.
Yeah.
So we just reminisce about like, yeah, that job is just thankless.
Yeah, I actually just heard them after one of the mud races, they were talking about it. And he was saying the same thing. He was just like, he said somebody, I don't remember who it was, but or even who he was working for, but they got splashed. And the second moto, the guy comes out wearing another pair of goggles, like another brand. And he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, the goggles suck. I couldn't see anything. He's like, everybody had their goggles off. Like, it's a mud race. I don't know what you think was going to happen here, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and then there's the weird aspect of lots of superstition, lots of little weird things that quirky things that riders have. And
Yeah.
like I just remember, like I tried to be strategic about, like colors of goggle straps, things like that. Like you wouldn't think that would be a big deal, right? Where some guy would get a pair of goggles and then another one would see it and they'd be like, well, why didn't I get that pair of goggles? Like, I
Yeah.
want those. Like, he's more special than me. And I'm always like, oh my gosh, I felt like I was a therapist sometime having to juggle all these situations where make sure they all felt like they were special.
Juggle all these egos.
Yeah.
I would say that's one of our issues with the sport and being bigger, like, and there being more money in the sport. Like, let's say, people that are fans of football or hockey or whatever will buy their favorite player's jersey, right, on their team.
Mm-hmm.
But motocross guys are like, I'm not buying a Kenny Roczen jersey. I'm going to wear my own jersey. I ride too. You know, and
Yep.
everybody's like, I want a discount or free gear or, you know, because everybody's in the sport to some kind of level. And I guess that's just action sports in general, you know, is that it's harder to, you know, like pass the sniff test with action sports people because most of them really do the sports. People that are into skateboarding probably skateboard at a level. BMX, they do it. Most people
Yep.
after high school are not playing football any longer.
Yep.
That's just end of
Yeah, that
story. You're done.
power sports, I think they and action sports in general, like you said, people want a participation discount.
Yeah.
Instead of a participation trophy, they want the discount, you know, which is I mean, that's why there's things like, you know, like Rich's you know, MX sponsor. You know, I mean, I think
Yeah.
he's done really well with it. You know, I was talking to him at the AIM Expo, and he's like, "Man, they refurbished the site," and he goes, "It's doing better than ever." You know, because I feel like there's a lot of people that, you know, a lot of people get involved in, you know, a lot more women. You know, other just and now the vet scene, as I just saw, where like Pingree just came out with the new podcast where it's kind of focused on, uh, I think it's what's his name, Rick Doherty, but it's focused on vet riders. You know, I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. You know, like I mean, the more
Yeah.
they like kind of like micro audiences that you can address, I think it just makes the sport grow that much more.
Yeah, it's funny that the vet thing, when I was young, there was like a couple of guys that raced the old guys class, and you were like, those dudes are awesome, and that was it. And now it's like almost the biggest classes at the race is like the vet classes now.
Oh yeah,
So
yep.
it's kind of crazy. That really has, proudly enough, it's our generations, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's guys like my age, you know, like I'll be 55 next month, and so yeah, I feel like there's a lot of guys my age, and like my old co-host on the Pit Pass there when I was doing it, Dave Selecki. I mean, he calls himself a professional vet practice rider. You know, so I like that. You know, he's like I don't even put race in there. It's just I'm a professional vet practice rider. I just you know ride with my friends and family and have a good time with it.
Yeah, I have a lot. There's a lot of guys actually. So I grew up in New Jersey. I moved to Georgia for like 13 years. And when I came back, the same guys that had tracks when I was younger, you know, they were in their 30s or whatever when I was in my teens and 20s. And now, same thing. They're 50 to 60 and they got, you know, still manicured perfectly private tracks. And they just ride those. And sometimes they'll go to a practice day. But they're getting to the practice day early so that it's not all beat to hell already. And they're
Yep.
riding and they're getting out of there. Like they just, great riders. Like I said, I've been around them my entire life, used to race, and they just, you know, go and ride their own practice tracks all the time now and just enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it's cool how there's almost like it's like factory vet riders now. You got guys like, I mean, these are all guys that I race with, like Mike Brown and
Yeah.
Mike Treadwell, Keith Johnson, you know, Barry Carson from your neck of the woods.
Yep.
Like these are all the guys that are just kind of crushing it in the vet class. You know, John Gruey, another one, you know, like from
Yep.
Michigan. Like I raced against him quite a bit, you know, back in the day. And so like all these guys, it's kind of wild for me to see it because I'm like I'm to the point where like you know I'm overweight, but I'm like so I'm just like yeah my day is probably on the track or gone just because I don't really I know I'm going to be realistic with myself. I don't have the fitness. You know my wrist would still want to probably twist pretty good, but I'd probably end up on the ground. So I
Yeah.
just I probably know that's behind me, but it's cool to see those guys just keep going, and now they've got kids, and like I think Barry's wasn't his son like
His son's
he's now
fast.
on the pro gate, you know,
Yeah.
so pretty wild.
One time I beat Mike Treadwell at an arena cross. It was super muddy, and I got a third, and I beat Mike Treadwell. I remember when I was like all over him, and I'm like, "What the hell is going on? What is going on right now?" And then I passed him, and I was like, "That was awesome." I still tell people about it. Obviously, I'm like, "I beat Mike Treadwell."
Great
um,
guy though. I feel like there's just so many of those guys that are all just like we would all back then. We all kind of hang out in Florida. There's a guy named Gene Newmack. I don't know if you remember him at
yep.
all. But yeah, so he had a house in Florida, and then like Treadwell and all these different people that were all kind of congregate there, and we all ride together and train, air quotes, because we don't really know how to train.
Do
But
you know Mark Pillion?
I know the name, but I can't remember if
He's a Jersey
I
guy.
raced.
So when I started,
Okay,
and he raced Supercross and stuff. Was a 125, mainly a 125 guy. Um,
Robbie Hayes, probably another one I think from your neck of the wood. I think he was
I
up that
don't.
way.
So Mark actually lived a town over from me, and I showed up to his door one day when I was 15 and was like, "Hey, I want to try to go to Loretta's." Blah blah blah. Asked him if I could practice, and he's like, because I rode my bike there. He's like, "Go ride around, do some laps. I'm gonna watch you, make sure that you're good. Good enough to ride it." And then I rode it, and I came back, and he's like, "All right, we ride Tuesdays and Thursdays after 3 o'clock." And that was it. And then I went and
Cool.
rode
That
there
was your
for
foot in the
years.
door, huh?
Yep. And then years
Nice.
later, he goes, "You lied to me." I go, "What?" He goes, "You never went to Loretta's." And I was like, "I was trying." So that's actually how I got to ride all the local tracks around here, all the private tracks, because Mark knew everybody. And then we got to a point where he knew me well enough. He was like, it was actually once I turned 18. He goes, "You're 18 now?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "All right. On Wednesdays, I go and ride tracks down the shore." And he goes, "But we'll take my truck and I'll pay for gas, but you got to load the bikes and drive." And I was like, "Done." So I'd show up, wash the bikes off, load them up in the truck. And then when he got done with work, we'd head out to ride.
But what were your track? Were they like tracks you had to poach, like on person's private land? Because that's how it was in the where I grew up in Ohio. It was always riding on these kind of areas that were sketchy to where I remember I had an area where there was two sets of train tracks. So on the other side of the track was where we had our tracks laid out. Well, I'd park on the other side of the tracks with my pickup backed up with the ramp already on it.
Uh-huh.
And then if the cops came,
Shoot
I figured
into
out
it.
how to just double jump both sets of tracks and just load
Nice.
up and roll out.
No, luckily, and because of knowing those guys, we were going to like people's yard tracks.
Oh,
Because
cool.
Mark
Yeah.
had raced forever and knew everybody, so he knew everybody with a track. So, like I said, on Wednesdays, we'd just go and hit somebody else's track up, and just ride there for the day. So I was very, very lucky being around those guys. Like I said, Mark had a track. My friend Al, Mark still has a track. So does Al. And then there was another track right around the corner from my parents' house. And then everything else we rode, in this area up North Jersey was like sand quarries or something like that, where we'd
Yeah.
get chased sometimes, or same thing, park our trucks like wherever so you could ride back and get to them. But yeah, and actually the guy I rode with most is Mark Waldell, who works for
Oh
Western
yeah.
Power Sports. I was gonna say, you may know. So he was my really close friend. Where as soon as I'm a year older than him, or about that, when he turned pro, he and I just went to every national and arena cross that we could go to by ourselves. Once he got old enough, so that was like my partner to go with, to all these nationals. And basically, I'd ride. Sometimes he'd ride 125 and I'd ride 250, and then we'd pit board for each other. So that was our little crew there. We had some other people. Oh, Dave Janolfi.
Yeah.
He grew up right around here too and rode with us all the time.
Yeah, speaking of goggles, right? I mean, that
Yeah,
he's definitely
exactly.
one of those guys that I'm sure was probably stressing quite a bit,
Yep.
at those mud rounds.
Yeah. I met him when he was on 80s. I had just gotten on the 125s and he was just an 80 kid when I met him. So that's funny. So do you do a lot of video as well, or?
No, I don't do any video. Like that's kind of one of the things I stay away from just because I don't know. I feel like it's hard to do. I mean, it's hard enough to be a good writer, be a good videographer, it's just too much, you know. So I feel like I've decided choose one thing, focus on that. And that's partly why I decided to leave Pit Pass Moto. I just decided, I've been doing it for 2.5 years. Yeah, it was fun, and I feel like I did put some great stuff out there. Hopefully it's, somewhat timeless where people can discover it a couple years down the road and it's still relevant. But I really want to focus more on writing. And so, yeah, kind of walking away from that, I'm going to refocus. And as a result, like it was weird timing, but I let that go. And the eBay Motors got, my contract with them. They said, hey, you want to go because I was doing every 2 weeks, I'd write a piece for them. He's like, would you be interested in going to weekly? And I'm like, absolutely. So it's kind of like
Cool.
sort of solved itself, like it sort of replaced what I had with Pit Pass. And um, yeah, so just going to keep focusing on as much writing projects as I can get.
So, and this may sound weird, but I would say writing initially would have been magazines and stuff, which there are less magazines. So, like,
Yep.
you're writing for websites, or what exactly would you be writing for?
Kind of both. I mean, I do write there's a magazine like Vahna, which is still in print. I'm sure you've probably seen that before. It's just a
Yeah.
beautiful, coffee table style book. And so those pieces I kind of cherish as, those are the ones that I'm like, wow, that's kind of a bucket list piece, to write for that magazine and have my name show up on the masthead,
Yeah.
and it's something I'll be able to carry around. But you're right, there's a ton of blogs out there now, and like every brand for the most part typically has a blog on their website and they want SEO help. And so there'll be a thought piece I'll do, like a subject piece for a brand that hopefully gets people when they're doing research to, like I'll use DynoJet as a perfect example. Like they're very specific products for UTVs, like fuel products, fuel tuning products.
I was gonna
And
say
so
we
when
deal
people are
with them
doing
at the
their
shop.
Yeah, so when you're like people are doing their research, if you write a piece that's kind of an informative educational piece that's living on the DynoJet blog, then hopefully they end up there. Like they're doing their research, oh, they happen to land on DynoJet, I'll buy a DynoJet part. So that's kind of the idea behind that. That's really the premise behind the term content marketing. I mean, that's really what that is. It's just repetition of useful information, informative information, lifestyle information that kind of humanizes, gives the brand, yeah, just a human element. Because let's face it, a lot of brands you feel like they're kind of devoid of that. They don't really have a human face to them. Where the brands that to me are my favorite, like a Fast House, I just feel like they have a soul. They have, they feel like they have some people behind that you can kind of relate to. And
Which
so,
this is kind of why people or companies align themselves with influencers, right? Because there's not,
yep,
it's bringing the human element to it, and people are like, I like this person, and they say this about that. And so it's like you said, versus just reading an advertisement or, the packaging, it's at least some kind of a, for lack of better word, like a review, or at least a human perspective on the whatever it is, the product, versus just like a explanation of what the product is.
yeah, like I think it feels a little bit more neutral, like if that's even correct. But yeah, I'll use an example. I was recently able to go to the Harley Davidson 120th anniversary festival in Milwaukee this past summer, last year. And I was part of I went for rideapart.com, another like online sort of news website. And so I was writing a piece to cover it. Well, as part of it, I got to ride the new CVO bikes.
Awesome.
And in the group that I was with were a bunch of YouTubers, and so it was totally eye-opening for me to kind of hang out with. I thought it would be all traditional media people, like people that work for like I was going for Ride Apart, for other magazines, motorcyclists, whatever, But it was half the people were influencers. And what I learned from them is that people the value of these influencers is they're not kind of beholden to sponsors or a brand. So like I'll use this guy named Tall. Like he came there and he's like, I just tell it how it is. Because if I get on the bike and it feels like shit, I'm gonna say it feels like shit. And that's why people follow him.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where like mainstream media is kind of losing their way because they're so beholden to sponsors that it just directs too much of what they're doing. and it makes
Yeah.
them biased, let's face it. And so, which I get it, they're trying to make a living, they're trying to stay alive, but it's not helpful, in a lot of ways. And so I think that's where the rise of these influencers, these YouTubers, where, I mean, yeah, you're getting real information and they're not sugarcoating it. And so I think that's the shift I see in media where like the mainstream media is just kind of falling farther and farther behind
Yeah.
in my mind.
And even for companies, right? Instead of producing their own content and trying to build up their own, following, they're just like, let Tall ride this bike. He's got 1 million
Yep.
subscribers, so there's 1 million people we'll pretty much almost get in front of. And like you said, if he likes the thing and he gives it a good review, then all those people, have that outlook on it. So I think it's
I mean,
definitely,
it's risky.
and they don't, it is risky if he doesn't like it also, but they
Yeah.
also don't have to pay anybody to produce anything. They're not coming out of
Yep.
pocket for a camera guy and an editor, any of that. It's just let this guy go and do his thing. So it is a little more turnkey. I guess you just have to be confident in your product.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because yeah, I mean, I'll even go further. Like that guy Tall I was telling you about, like I mean, they'll give him a whole bike, to take for a month, and so that's where I'm like, man, that really is like you have to believe in your product to be all in on this type of strategy because it can certainly backfire,
Yeah.
if your product's garbage. So,
Yeah,
but
you
when it
go a
works,
little
it works.
early. Yeah, you go a little early and give them a product that's not quite hammered out
Yep.
yet, and that could be the end of it, because a lot of bad press right off of the rip, and now you're fighting yourself out of a hole.
Yeah, I've always been like, this is kind of weird, but there's that saying, like any press is good press. And I don't believe that personally. Like, I feel like that's just too far. Like, I don't want to I wouldn't want to be part of a brand that is using negativity and
Yeah,
bad press to build themselves up. Like, it's just not something that I would feel good about. So, but that's just me personally, so
I feel like that's if you can pick the ball up and run with it and not let it destroy you, then sure. But you know, a lot of times, and if the narrative gets out there, it's hard to get retractions because the initial thing negative gets out there, and then we see it with everything, right? Something gets said, and then nobody waits to see what the actual outcome was. They're just outraged about the initial statement, so then they're like, we don't like this guy, and it's like, it turns out
yep,
that's not
pile
even what
on.
happened. Yeah.
Just piling on like it just that's the way it seems to happen, knee jerk piling on. But yeah, like no waiting and figuring out getting
Yeah.
all the facts. It's
No.
just jump on.
What then? This might be sidetracking, but what happened to Alta? I feel like they never really got negative press. I don't know why I was thinking that, but like that they were just like a couple of years ahead of their time, and now all of a sudden the electric market is being filled. But that's really weird. They went away as quick as they did.
Yeah, I think it just too soon. Like ahead, like you said, ahead of their time. Probably made some find some mistakes along the way. I think probably when you're building a bike from scratch, and then all of a sudden you have an order for whatever 3,000 of them, and you got to come up with that money. Yeah, that's probably a tough situation to be in. I think
Yeah.
some of these companies don't realize they're not prepared for that trajectory where it just grows really quickly and gets them in a hole. I think from what I've understand, brand that's happened to some brands here and there in our industry.
You just got to do the Harley thing and be like, we're producing this many a year, and if the price goes up, guess what?
Yep.
That's what it is. Uh-huh.
There is a ton of electric bikes though at that AIM Expo. I couldn't
Oh,
believe how
really?
many, oh, just so many, and non-electric brands that were just never heard of them, like full-size dirt bikes from China that were
Oh,
just like this a brand like BKM or something like that. I'm like, what? I mean, it's just amazing. Like it looked like a 7-year old, a KTM or something, where they're
yeah.
just reverse engineering these things and just cranking them out, because they probably don't have any regulations that are as stringent as here, as to where they're just, I mean, just yeah, you wouldn't
I'm
believe how
sure.
many dirt bikes brands are out there right now.
I did some shows in China, and we jumped at like their national motocross championship. and the first guy is on like a Honda. He's gone. And then everybody else is on those Chinese bikes. And I'm just like, don't jump that double. like, like that thing may break. Don't do it.
Yeah, foot pegs are sagging after a couple jumps, probably, you
Dude,
know.
I was blown away that they were racing those. And then I was like, maybe I should race in China because maybe that first guy will beat me. I don't know if I may be able to take the rest of these guys. I'll be factory CPB or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was, and then there's like, yeah, some of the, I think the Arctic Leopard, like I saw those, and come
They
to
just
find
raced
out
a
they're,
car.
oh yes, so they did, and then one other brand, let's see, that was Arctic Leopard. Well, of course, Cove's not electric. Cove, I guess, is how it's pronounced. But yeah, brands like that. There was just tons of dirt bikes. It just blew me away. I was like, wow, I had no idea that this market had blown up that quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, which is makes me like blows my mind that Alta just like literally missed the window by like 2 years.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Kind of
Um,
like Cannondale, maybe a little, huh? They just seemed like they were ahead of their
well,
time,
the
but maybe not.
the Cannondale though, poor Jeff Gibson never finished a moto on that thing because that was the same time frame when I was still racing,
Oh
and
yeah.
Gibson went from like doing fairly well to getting that ride, and then just couldn't even finish a moto.
I think wasn't Keith Johnson one of those Cannondale riders too?
He might have been. I just
Because I think
remember.
they're out of Connecticut.
Yeah, no, they're up in this
Yeah.
neck of the woods. Um, I just remember him because he was semi-local, so I'd see him all the time at stuff. And then the poor Cannondale deal, and I was like, oh, seemed cool at first. That was the same era of Husky coming back with the DKNY Husky, and that
Yeah.
actually. So they worked with Vertucci or something, who's right in Pennsylvania, Eastern Pennsylvania as well.
Was it Faraci? Remember that?
Faraci, that's what it was.
Fast by Faraci. Yeah.
Yup.
Yep.
It's funny. There's a lot of motocross like history up in the Northeast here, even though you wouldn't think it. Even and I'm sure you'll probably know this. Tim Ferry rode for Rossini Racing Products,
Oh yeah, RRP. Yep.
which was
Yep.
like literally 25 minutes away from my house now. It's gone now. It's some kind of event center. If you go there, it's like an artsy event center, the shop. But
There was
um,
like a pipe brand out of like New York that was popular back in the day, and I just can't think of it. Like they made those super trick cone
not
pipes, like
Bills.
handmade. No, it wasn't Bill's. It was like out of like Western New York.
DEP.
Yeah, maybe that was it. Yes,
I think that's who it
I think
was.
so. But weren't they cool looking, like handmade,
Yeah.
like cone pipes? Yeah,
That was,
lots of little small brands like that that just
yeah.
I totally had forgotten about. You know.
Yep. Yep. And Boysen's right here. Or not right here, but pretty close. I'm good friends with
Yeah,
Glenn.
Doc Boyson. He's definitely somebody I raced against quite a
Yep.
bit too. So
I know Dog. I raced against Dog. I'm good friends with the younger brother, Glenn, who is now the engineer at Boysen. I finished second. No, I beat Dog for the Hurricane Hills Track Championship solely because I showed up to more races than he did. Because every time he showed up, he would just smoke me. And we had this one half an hour race there, and I uh, was like, could stay like a little bit behind him, and every time I'd try to pull up on him, he'd like look over and like pull away. And he goes, man, you almost had me if that race was a little longer. I was like, that race would have had to have been an hour longer for you to get tired enough. I was like, I watched 30 plus. This is at the time I'm like 19 or something. I go, I watched 30 plus. I said, you got the exact same lead on that guy and just sat there, and I know I'm going faster than him. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're just riding how fast you need to go. And he just smirked at me and then walked away. He never said anything. I was like,
yeah, he was one of those guys that was just sneaky fast, you
so
know,
fast.
but super smooth on the bike,
Yeah.
just good form. You know, I felt like he had that classic, David Bailey style, which is what like I grew up trying to emulate, like him and Johnny O'Mara and a little bit of Jeff Ward, like we used to do, try and emulate the Wardies. Do you ever do that where you put your foot out in the air when you're coming into a turn,
I
like off a double?
I haven't. It's been a long time, and I never think of it when I'm at any place to do it. I'm never like, put your leg out in the air. It never happens. But
Yeah, I feel like Jeff Ward was the master of that. Like he was so his short, his stature, so he couldn't really he had to jump the whoops a lot, and then but he just had such good like clutch and throttle control where he would just
yeah,
come in almost like a Cooper Webb kind of style where he'd just come in really tight and just pivot the bike like unbelievably quickly,
you
And
know,
so he was just amazing in the turns.
you bringing that up makes me. So I grew up watching those guys, but I obviously didn't know the things that I get now about riding and racing, and it's like I wonder if I went back and watched if I noticed a lot more stuff like that. Because I'm
Probably.
more looking into style and lines and techniques and stuff like that now. Because, like, to me, I mean, Jet and Kenny are like the ultimate styles. Those guys are
Yeah.
carrying so much speed and just so smooth and do little things nobody else is doing that you don't really catch on to until you like pay close attention. Then you go, oh, that's where they're making the tenths of a second every lap.
To me, like Jet's the most thing that stands out to me is like, I mean, I like I'm the type of person like I just devour like every second of like race day live, like on Saturday for the races. Like I'm watching all the stuff in
Yeah.
practice because to me that's where you see all the cool stuff because they're trying new rhythm
Yeah.
sections. But Jet, I just swear, like he just somehow has the ability to stay like even a good guy like Plessinger or Anderson, he'll be 3, 4 feet lower off the same jump and just straightforward momentum. It's just like he doesn't go up, he goes forward. And I don't know how he does it, but it's just, and maybe it's using his legs or whatever, but I feel like it just has to be, you have to be so confident in your ability to go off a big triple jump and know that you're going to land it perfectly timed
Yeah.
and scrub off that much speed and stay and keep your forward momentum. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what just blows my mind.
Come in way hot and just chop on the face and carve the
Yeah.
hell out of it.
So
Especially
like you
on a
have these long
supercross
rhythm
track.
section. What's that?
Especially on a supercross track where
Oh
everything's
yeah.
so tight. It's like one thing to jump things, it's another thing to actually flow through it, like you're saying.
Yeah. And I feel like he just like that last week was a good example because there's like what, 13 or 14 jumps and one straightaway to where like those rhythms, like you add that up over time, those like tenth of a seconds where he's staying, that much lower and just keeping his forward momentum, that just adds up to that could be a half a second right there in that one straightaway. It's just kind of it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that rhythm section was gnarly because it was so long that it was. Once you got that much momentum, it was easy to be like just a teeny bit too much throttle and end up in the face of the quad
Yep.
when you only wanted to triple. So I was like, man, that's. And I guess they were saying, which is true, if they'd made them a little less peaky, or gnarly, it probably would have been a little bit easier. But I mean, other than the couple of people that got knocked out or whatever, it was a good separator.
It's funny though. I look at the track. The biggest difference to me, like in addition to the bikes, of course, back when in the '80s, when like for example, I remember like I raced the '89 East Rutherford. Like I got fifth in that race. And
Awesome.
the tracks were just they didn't flow. Like they
Yeah.
never flowed. Like
No.
they flow so nicely now. Back then, I felt like everything was these weird like I don't know what you want to call them, termite mound looking. I mean, everything was peaky and just did not flow correctly. So, like, to get your bike down in these between these jumps and to have any kind of flow, like, I watch those old videos and I'm like, God, we look like we're going so slow,
Yeah.
but that's just the bikes and the tracks, at the time. So, but yeah, now, like, I feel like their speeds are so much higher because everything is more rounded and they flow through
Yeah.
stuff better.
And everything's set to go. Like you said, when back then, you were. They didn't have the rhythm sections, so it's like you said, you have this peaky thing to just slow people down, and then like, I remember they used to do the whoops on. They had them like staggered; they were on each side or whatever, instead of being like a whole whoop. And it was just they were still trying to figure out exactly like what type of obstacles, we can make.
Yeah, I think my last Supercross I ever did was the 1994. It was actually 90. No, it was 95. So 94, I got just enough points to get national number 90 for 95. So I was like all
Awesome.
pumped. I'm like, I got my second national number, and then I broke both my wrists at an arena
Ugh.
cross, and so like that was kind of just the beginning of the end. So I go to try and race some more supercrosses. I'm floundering. I'm like over jumping stuff. I'm casing things because my wrists hurt. I'm afraid I'm gonna re-break them. But we went to Charlotte, and that year in 1995, the track was just like Excite Bike, just peaked,
Uh-huh.
jumping up onto top of tabletops, and just I mean, I was just remember being like petrified that I was gonna like break my wrist again. So I was like, yeah, this is I think it's time to probably hang it up, you know. And then
Yeah.
back then I was riding, you could ride both classes.
Yep.
So I'd ride 125 and 250. So like go to my heat race on the 125 and then get off the bike, get on a 250. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
hard enough to do as it is, you know, like retime everything on the
Yep.
track. And
What would you ride first in practice?
I think it was always 125 first
Oh, the
and then
practice order.
yeah.
So I raced 125 250s, and I learned very quickly that I needed to ride my 250 first, or I
Mm,
was going to overjump everything.
yeah, that's probably true. Cause I actually, when I think I re-broke one of my wrists at a local race in Troy, Ohio, Kenworthy's, because of that exact thing. I was riding both 125 and 250, and I like hopped back on my 125, thinking I was on the 250 in my mind, and I just
Mm,
blipped a triple and faced it and just
yeah.
snapped. Just
Yeah.
a brain lapse.
125s, you had to hit everything wide open in whatever gear it was. And then if you rode the 250 like that, it's like you're going out into the flats. And like you said, if you forget and chop at all on a 125, not going to happen.
Yep. Yeah. That was. I mean, that's what you did when you were a privateer. I think in that era, because they allowed it, and you could, I can make more money. If
Yeah.
I just get into the night program on the 250, I can at least get some money, and then I'll
Yeah.
focus on 125 or whatever.
Yep, exactly. Those are the Iron Man days. I know you mentioned it before. Barry did that a lot, and we even I think somebody just posted something about that, and I don't remember if at the time because I do know like Hurricane Hills, they used to start the pro class at noon. Pro practice would be at noon, like in the middle of the order, and they literally changed it the year I turned pro. I was I was like, yeah, noon, and then they were like, we changed it. Pro runs same schedule, and I'm like, what? But so I don't know if Englishtown used to do that or if nights after or races after Supercrosses they would just hold the pro class, and then
Mm.
he'd like call the track and be like, we're whatever 2 hours away, and they would be on the loudspeaker like, so last night at Pontiac, Michigan, which is like friggin' 20 hours away or something, they're like, Barry got fourth. He's on his way now. They're in, Pennsylvania. And I'm like, what? And they would just hold practice and everything until they pulled in, and then they would run practice in the pro motos.
That's awesome.
Dude,
What a legend.
he's a
Yeah, he's
maniac,
definitely one
dude.
of the just keeps going, like this unreal how long he's been riding a dirt bike. And racing a dirt bike, I should say.
And
Let's
he's
see.
still so fast. And he never
Yep.
like, so when I was racing arena cross, I didn't make the main, and me and Waldell were watching from the stands, and Barry hole shots this arena cross, and he's winning. He's gone, and we're like, Barry's about to win this arena. He falls over. I'm like, I've watched this dude for my whole life. I've seen him fall over like 3 times probably, and I'm like, so bummed for him. I thought for sure he was about to win that arena cross.
He was always, I just remember like I was one of those guys, and I think Barry probably too, like we didn't really get the best of starts in like outdoor nationals in 125 class. And so felt like there was so many times where him and I would just be coming through the pack, together. But he was a difficult guy to pass, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Because he's so consistent, like he just hit his marks all the time. And he
yeah.
just like you said, he rarely messed up. It was hard, he was a hard guy to pass.
He doesn't look like he's going fast. If you were to watch him, you're like, Oh, he's doing all right. And then you try to follow him, and you're like, damn, just very quiet on the bike. You know, like
Yep.
no extra moves, nothing, and just like you said, always same laps. I'm like, holy shit.
At 10,000 hour rule, right? Like how many hours do you think
Oh
he's
my
had, probably?
God, dude. And on Suzuki's, like 1,000,000 hours on Suzuki's alone.
Yep.
For how much of Suzuki's contingency money do you think goes to Barry? Probably like a quarter of it all goes to Barry. He just keeps winning it.
Man, what do you think? He's probably got to make a good 20K off of that, don't you think? Maybe?
I
Maybe?
would
I don't know.
imagine. I mean, he plays the game well as far as contingency races and stuff. Was always at all the series races, and he's got to have some kind of deal, right? Or why would he still be running Suzuki's?
Is he still out of the same shop too, like Bromley or something like that? Because
I
he's forever.
I think so. Didn't his family own it? I
I don't
think his.
know.
I
I don't
thought his.
remember that, but
Maybe he just worked there or something. I don't know what. I thought he had some kind of connection more than just riding for him, but. Um, all right, well, let's. What do you got coming up, and where can everybody find you?
yeah. So the easiest way to find me is you can just Google. Well, you can go to my portfolio, dalespangler.com, and I have all my work on there. My business name, Buzz Media, buzzmediacontent.com. If anyone's interested in working with me on if there's some brands out there, or even dealers, like it doesn't matter. Like I'll work with anybody. If the project look like it's going to be fun and it's something that my biggest thing is like I like to work with brands that kind of get it, and so I've been lucky that way to be able to work with a lot of great brands already. Like you kind of mentioned some of them like Onyx and Dynojet and this eBay Motors contractor. So it's been, yeah, I mean it's slowly been growing, and it's nice to do things that I feel like give back to the sport that's been pretty much my whole life, so at this point, I just like doing things that are like feel good projects, like that's kind of what I was doing with the podcast there for a while, just trying to give something back and shine a light on people like yourself, that we had on that are out there doing cool stuff to build up our sport and our industry. You can also follow my social media. The only thing I'm on now is Instagram at Dale Spangler. Not really too active on there, really, but yeah, you just kind of look for my stuff on the interwebs.
Awesome, sounds good. Thank you everybody for watching, and yeah, if you got any questions or anything for Dale, either shoot them to me or find him yourself, and I'm sure people will be like, how do I make a living writing stories for motorsports?
Yeah, hit me up. I'm always love talking to people about, I've had some people recently reach out to me through LinkedIn and asking how they can get into power sports, and I'll hop on a call like no problem. I'm an open book with that, and I enjoy helping. I guess you say, I think the term's connector. Like I love connecting other people. If I can't do a project or I don't feel like I'm the right person for a project, I'll always try and recommend somebody else. And I feel like that's come back to me in some cases too, where people have recommended me. And so just trying to kind of, I don't know, help each other out, like why not? I feel like we need more of that these days.
100%. That's amazing because that's not a perspective that a lot of people have. I feel like a lot of people are too much like other people getting stuff is going to take away from me or getting into the business or whatever. And I think probably more often than not, it's more helpful helping people because then at least they have good words or they will think to maybe refer you as well.
Yeah, I just think that like we just need more transparency, and honesty. Like I said, if I feel like don't feel good about a project or I feel like I'm not the right person, like I have no problem saying I don't think I'm the right person. Like and to me that's very refreshing. Like I'd rather have somebody tell me that than say yes I can do it and then not really knowing how to do it and they have to go figure it out. Like to me I just I don't know, that's where I'm at. Like I don't want to have to deal with that stress. So like if I'm don't feel like I'm the right person, I'll admit that and that's okay, because I feel like you said, it's other people have given me work, in return, and so I feel like that's one of those things where sort of pay it forward. Hopefully it comes back to you.
There you go. We'll leave it with that. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.